1 week after Joe Biden flip-flopped and decided to pardon his son Hunter, everyone, has presidential pardons on their Christmas wish lists now. NBC News reports Biden is weighing preemptive pardons for people on Donald Trump's enemies lists, like Anthony Fauci, Senator-elect Adam Schiff, or former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. Whatever one thinks about the prudence of preemptive pardons and the slippery slope that might cause, there are some people who Biden should strongly consider using his special power for. Native American activist Leonard Peltier, who has been in prison for almost 50 years and has long maintained his innocence in the killing of 2 FBI agents, has some powerful advocates calling on Biden to grant him clemency, including Senate Indian Affairs Committee Chair Brian Schatz of Hawaii, along with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Criminal justice advocates are pointing out that Biden currently has the lowest presidential pardon record of any president in modern history and are asking for clemency for people who are subject to unjustly aggressive prosecutions. But with the constant attacks on press freedom from the incoming administration, the rights of journalists and whistleblowers are clearly under threat. Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky, a Republican, and James McGovern of Massachusetts, a Democrat, have teamed up to urge President Biden to pardon WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, as they worry his plea deal sets a dangerous precedent for prosecuting journalists and whistleblowers with espionage offenses. Joining us now is Gabriel Shipton, the brother of Julian Assange. Gabriel, it's great to have you back on the show. Before we get to the push for a pardon for your brother, are you surprised that the Biden administration decided to make the plea deal initially, as Vice President Biden referred to him, to Julian, of course, as a high-tech terrorist?
Yeah, well, that was a very long time ago. I mean, that was back in 2010. So, but this was always a Trump administration prosecution. And during the Biden administration, when the publisher of the New York Times, for example, wrote to the president asking him to drop the charges against Julian, the rhetoric coming from the administration was always, we cannot interfere in an ongoing DOJ process. It was always going back to that separation of powers. So they never really pushed that hard, this prosecution. It sort of just played itself out, ending up in this plea deal where Julian was freed and returned home to Australia. But now that DOJ process is over, it is an opportunity for the president, for the Biden administration, to acknowledge those calls from people like the publisher of the New York Times, as well as press freedom groups all around the United States, over 26, who'd written to the Biden administration multiple times calling on him to drop this prosecution because of the threat that it meant to publishers. So now it's the president's chance to really stand up for the rhetoric that he's used before, saying journalism is not a crime, and unwind this horrible prosecutorial pathway that could potentially be used against publishers, against journalists who are publishing classified information in the future.
Let me ask you if you were surprised that Donald Trump didn't pardon him during his first term. I mean, many critics of both Trump and of WikiLeaks blamed the Clinton email leaks for her loss in 2016 and figured that Trump may want to return the favor. Were you surprised at the position that Donald Trump took, or you have any optimism that when he becomes president, he may pardon him?
Yeah, look, there are some new elements in this Trump II administration that I think have been calling for a pardon for Julian Assange, such as RFK Jr. He made it part of his campaign during his presidential run to call for a pardon for Julian. But I think really now it's up to the president. There's that ticking clock, and it's pardon season in the United States, in your country, and he has that opportunity now to really wind back this horrible deal, this horrible plea deal that Julian was made to plead guilty of, that criminalizes every step of the investigative journalism pathway, communicating with a source, publishing classified information, possessing classified information. It's the bread and butter of investigative journalists that has been made illegal through this deal. And it was, let's not forget, it did emanate from the Trump administration. So he had an opportunity to pardon Julian. He didn't do it. Now I think it's up to President Biden.
You were talking about the precedents that his plea deal sets. What's the case that you would make to the American public as to why the plea deal is so dangerous and the only way to correct it is through a presidential pardon by Biden?
Well, this sets up the precedent that journalists that can be investigated for doing their jobs, that for bringing information to the public, bringing classified government secrets to the public, which is what journalists are supposed to do. They're supposed to tell us about the truth about what governments are doing in our name, can be investigated and can be prosecuted under this precedent. So I think journalism is such an important pillar of all our democracies, particularly the American democracy, that it can't be under threat like this. And when we're going into an administration that people don't really know what's going to happen, I think journalism is more important than ever to really holding government to account.